You're listening to Eating for Eden, episode 47. When it comes to doing something about climate change, your food choices matter. Thanks for tuning in to Eating for Eden, a podcast that takes a food-first approach to climate action. I'm your host, Jessica J. Schroeder, and I am passionate about food that tastes good and does good. I'll guide you with practical tips and help you thoroughly enjoy your food along the way. As you make shifts in your own eating and purchasing habits, opting for plant-based products over animal-based ones, you may be wondering, which plant milk should I choose? Of all the options, and there are many, which is best? In this episode, we'll explore the environmental impact, nutrition, and cost comparisons between various plant milks to help you make the best decision of which plant milk to choose for yourself. Starting with planetary health, let's talk about the environmental impact of various milks. Our World in Data compares dairy milk to 4 common plant-based milks: oat, almond, rice, and soy, in 4 different categories of environmental concern: land use, greenhouse gas emissions, freshwater use, and eutrophication. And by the way, there is a terrific chart that Our World in Data has for this. It's super easy to digest it in visual form. So I encourage you to open the link in the show notes to follow along as I discuss the impacts. That is, unless you're driving, always be a responsible podcast consumer. Okay, let's start with land use. When it comes to land use, dairy milk uses the most and rice milk uses the least. But in case you think that means you need to choose rice milk over almond, oat, or soy, let's see how the span of 5 milks compares. Per liter of milk, dairy milk uses nearly 9 meters squared, whereas all 4 plant milks use less than 1 meter squared each. Rice milk may be the winner at 0.34 meters squared, but almond, soy, and oat milk are each close behind at 0.5, 0.66, and 0.76 meters squared respectively. Thus, even when we look at the, quote, most land-hungry of these 4 plant milks, oat, we see that even oat milk uses only 8.5% of the land that is used for dairy milk on a liter by liter basis. What about greenhouse gas emissions? No surprise, dairy milk again fares the worst at 3.15 kilograms of greenhouse gas emissions per liter of milk produced. While all the plant milks do better than this, here we have a slight reordering of plant milks compared to land use. Almond milk emits the least at 0.7 kilograms of greenhouse gas emissions per liter, while rice milk emits the most of these 4 plant milks at 1.18 kilograms of greenhouse gas emissions per liter. That means that oat and soy lie between these two at 0.9 and 0.98 kilograms of greenhouse gas emissions, respectively. And remember that cow's milk is at 3.15 kilograms, just as a comparison there. As we saw with land use, any of the plant milks is a better choice than dairy milk. Almond, oat, and soy emit less than 1/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions that dairy milk does, and rice isn't far behind that. Moving on to freshwater use. Here we see a bit more disparity between each of the milks. Dairy milk still does the worst, however. To produce just 1 liter of dairy milk, 628 liters of fresh water are needed. That's a lot. Moving on to the plant milks, we see them pull into 2 sort of pairings. The, quote, water-hungry plant milks of almond and rice versus the water-efficient plant milks of soy and oat. Almond milk requires about 371 liters of fresh water per liter, and rice milk requires nearly 270 liters of fresh water per liter of milk. Moving on to oat and soy, oat milk only requires about 48 liters of fresh water per liter, and soy milk wins the day with just under 28 liters of fresh water required per liter of soy milk produced. To sum up that broad expanse of freshwater requirements, dairy is at the far end with a high requirement. Almond and rice are in a sort of medium to medium-high requirement range, and both oat and soy sit nicely in the low requirement range. If we look at oat and soy compared to dairy here, dairy milk requires 13 times more water than oat milk and more than 22 times more water than soy milk for the same amount of milk. But also keep in mind that even though rice and almond use a lot more water than oat and soy, they are still better choices than dairy milk with regard to water use. Finally, let's touch on eutrophication, which is a phenomenon often caused by runoff when a body of water becomes more concentrated with nutrients, resulting in a negative impact on the ecosystem. Think undesirable algae blooms and the like, which harm aquatic life. Surprise, surprise, who does the damage, the most damage as far as eutrophication is concerned? You guessed it, dairy milk. And even though rice is by far the highest of the plant milks for its eutrophication, its impact is less than half that of dairy milk. Oat milk, almond milk, and soy milk are all fairly close together at the low end, with soy milk faring the best and at just 1/10 of the eutrophication impact of dairy milk. Based on these facts, soy and oat are probably the best options for the environment, with almond not far behind and rice also remaining on the table as an alternative to dairy. In general, any plant-based milk is a better option than dairy milk for environmental health, but if you're particularly concerned about making a big impact here, I would suggest opting for soy milk or oat milk. Moving on to nutrition. As each different plant-based milk is made from different ingredients, they will have different nutrition profiles. And keep in mind, too, that exact nutrition profiles will differ between various brands of milks and whether they are fortified with any vitamins and minerals and so forth. When it comes to calories overall and fat content of milks, they're going to vary widely depending on the type, the producer, whether or not the milk is sweetened or unsweetened. This is where you're going to need to do a bit more of side-by-side comparison in the grocery store or online to figure out what plant milk has the nutrition profile that you're seeking. Whole dairy milk will have the most fat of the main alternatives that we've been discussing thus far, and most of that fat will be saturated fat. Even 2% low-fat dairy milk, while similar in its number of grams of fat to some plant-based milks, has much higher amounts of saturated fats relative to the plant-based alternatives. Thus, one main nutritional benefit of plant-based milks, unless they contain coconut products, is that the majority of whatever fats they contain will be unsaturated, which are much preferred to saturated for our health. While there's a lot more we could consider in terms of nitty-gritty detail, let's focus in on two common nutrients of concern when it comes to the milk conversation: protein and calcium. First, let's hit protein. There's no way to sugarcoat it. The only plant milk that gives cow's milk a run for its money in the protein category is soy milk. If protein is a concern of yours, then soy is going to be your best option, unless, of course, you're allergic to soy. If so, then I encourage you to find other ways to make sure that you're meeting your protein needs. Again, compare between different brands here. Soy milks can run from 7, 8, and 9 grams of protein per cup, all the way up to 12 grams, depending on the producer. For comparison, cow's milk typically has 8 grams of protein per cup. So, again, giving it a run for its money. Next, on to calcium. Since dairy milk supplies calcium, it's often a common concern for folks switching to plant-based milks, wondering if they'll get enough calcium with that swap. Thankfully, most plant-based milks supplement with calcium, so this shouldn't be an issue. Just be sure to check the nutrition facts labels before you make your purchase to see how many milligrams are in a serving, to see if the plant milk you choose is helping you meet your calcium targets. If you choose to purchase a plant-based milk free from any additives, such as vitamin and mineral fortification, I would encourage you to consider the calcium intake of your overall diet. You might even consult your physician or a dietitian if you have concerns. It's also worth mentioning vitamin D in passing, as dairy milks often like to tout themselves as good sources of vitamin D. While we can get some small amounts of vitamin D from our diets, yes, it is primarily something our body synthesizes from getting sunlight on our skin. Both omnivores and plant-exclusive eaters alike can be deficient in vitamin D. If you're curious about your vitamin D status, talk to your doctor about options for checking your levels and consider supplementing under expert guidance. In short, vitamin D is not really something we should be looking to our food to acquire. In summary, as far as nutrition is concerned, if protein content is a big factor in your decision-making process, then opt for soy milk. And as for calcium, if you're counting on getting it from your milk source, be sure to check whether it's fortified and the amount that is in it before you make your purchase. Now that we've covered nutrition, let's move on to cost. Like many things, plant milks can vary widely in price. For instance, boutique-y kinds of finds like pistachio milk are going to be far more pricey than run-of-the-mill almond or soy milks. Here are a few considerations to keep in mind as far as price is concerned. First is brand. Compare prices between brands to find a good bang for buck with regard to what you're looking for. Personally, as much as I love Silk unsweetened soy milk, sometimes I will opt for the Whole Foods brand to save a buck or two. Though I don't really go to Whole Foods very often and I like the taste of Silk better, occasionally I'll choose it if I'm shopping there and don't mind a change in taste. Second, consider what store you're shopping at. Very likely, the same plant milk will run at different price points depending on the store. For instance, near my home, Target typically has the best price for Silk, and it can be a full $2 different in price between Target and, say, the health food store where I prefer to stock up on my bulk essentials. So know your stores, and wherever you live, those things are going to be different. So each place has their budget gems as well as their high-priced items. Third, consider size. While most plant milks come in half-gallon cartons, at least here in the States, some come in pint or quart sizes, and some are even offered in gallon sizes. Pay attention to unit price per fluid ounce. If you find a favorite plant-based milk that comes in a larger size, is it more affordable to opt for that size? Alternatively, don't be scared away by quart-sized cartons, whether in the fridge section of or the shelf-stable varieties, just because they're smaller. Again, compare the unit price and see what's best. And for my friends outside the States, all this applies to liters and milliliters and so forth. Finally, don't merely look at the price tag alone. Also consider bang for buck in light of nutrition or whatever else you might need to consider, such as allergies to nuts or soy. For example, while almond milk is sold in a gallon size at my local grocery store for a better price than my beloved Silk unsweetened soy milk, ounce for ounce. And by the way, I have no affiliation with Silk. I just love their product. I still opt for Silk soy milk for a few reasons. I like the nutrition profile, including its high protein content, the isoflavones inherent in soy products, and its calcium fortification, and more. 2, I really like the taste and texture of it. And 3, it's a pretty great choice for the environment. Okay, we made it through the 3 main areas of comparison. I'm going to add a quick bonus one here at the end, and that is use and taste. What plant milk you choose may also come down to use and taste. Where and how will you be using your plant milk? And what taste do you prefer and in what context? I tend to order oat milk, for example, when I'm out at a coffee shop and I want a cappuccino or a latte. It's the closest analog to cow's milk that coffee shops tend to source, and it goes splendidly with coffee. When I'm at home, I tend to use soy milk because I enjoy the taste and the nutritional profile. It works well in cooking and baking as well, so it will often find its way into oatmeal, muffins, even savory sauces that I make. Sometimes I will opt for making my own cashew cream or cashew milk if I want something a bit closer to dairy cream or milk, say for use in a dessert or for a luscious mushroom gravy to top biscuits for a special brunch. And check out the show notes if you'd like a link to my cashew cream recipe on eatitandme.com. All that to say, there is a place for considering the taste profile or use of the plant milk you're choosing. So back to our initial question, which plant milk is the best? Given the variety of things we've covered in this episode, I can't really call out one over the other. Soy definitely has a leg up nutritionally. Oat and cashew are probably the best for replacing dairy when dairy flavor is really something that you want. Almond can be pretty affordable, but so can others depending on where you shop. So all in all, here's the main point I want you to walk away with. Any plant-based milk is a better choice than cow's milk. Plus, you may opt for a variety of milk options depending on the scenario. So my advice, start with your needs, whether they be nutritional, allergen-related, whatever, and then try a few to see what you like. Don't forget that enjoyment is a very important part of our food journeys. Thanks so much for listening in to this episode today. I hope that this has been interesting and informative. If you learned something or found something helpful, share it around on social media or pass it on to a friend. We often feel more empowered to make change when we do so in connection with others. So thanks for doing your part in that. If you have questions or want to suggest a topic for a future episode, I would love to hear from you. Send an email to edenandme@substack.com. Also, if you've been enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving a review. I'd love to grow the reach of the podcast here in 2025, and I need your help to do so. Thank you in advance. If you want recipes, head over to edenandme.com, where you can find a variety of delicious recipes to bring what you're learning into the kitchen. Finally, become an email subscriber on Substack to have new podcast episodes delivered right to your inbox. If you appreciate the work I'm doing and want to support the show, you'll also have the option of becoming a paid subscriber. That's all for now, friends. Until next time, be well. Thanks for listening to Eating for Eden. If you found this episode informative or inspiring, please consider sharing it with a friend. Climate change is an issue we all need to tackle together, so let's invite others to journey along with us as we continue the conversation and start taking action. Until next week, friends, take care.